Summer is supposed to be a crazy fun time for kids, parents, families, everyone. It's a time to get out and go to the beach and go to festivals and go to carnivals. Those are always interesting. Lots of healthy food and choices there. Just kidding. But the truth is, summer's supposed to be kind of crazy, but in a good way. With the carnivals, the parties, the festivals, the 4th of July fireworks, and everything in between. But here's therefore what summer brings. Lots of action, lots of loud noises, lots of late nights, maybe staying up and having fun, lots of travel, taking on vacations. So different schedules that lead to often tantrums, meltdowns, behavior issues, and what some parents may then, during that season, start to figure out, is this more? Is my child struggling with sensory issues, or is there signs here of my child struggling with sensory processing disorder, which is the root of all sorts of other challenges that are the same neurology, which we'll teach you here on this video, the root cause of sensory issues, anxiety, ADHD, and even for some kiddos, spectrum issues as well. Because once you see the neurology that comes with these symptoms of tantrums and meltdowns and sensitivities to certain clothings, certain foods, maybe hypersensitivities and being overwhelmed instantly, or hyposensitivities and withdrawing from such activities and missing out on them. We're going to get into the thick of the science of sensory issues in kids after we help you recognize the signs of sensory processing disorder in kiddos. So this is a two-part important video for you as a parent. If you've watched your kiddo not only have these issues, yes, there was a sleepover, we stayed up late, they got tired, totally normal that they're more emotional, having behavior issues. But what if it's every day? What if it's every time you go into not only a big festival or a big carnival, but what if it's at a store every time you go in? What if it's at a restaurant every time your family tries to go out to eat? What if it's at every sleepover or every birthday party just in the neighborhood? What if it's absolutely overwhelming your family and you can tell something more is going on? Well, that's the case for 1 in 6 families. And actually the data I'm using there's 1 in 6 kids today in the United States has sensory processing disorder and sensory issues. And I think it's actually more than that because that data is outdated. It's many years old. And what's been happening with this trend of sensory issues, autism spectrum issues, ADHD, anxiety in kids, unfortunately, it's on a massive upslope right now, what's called a hockey stick spike. So it's not just slowly going up, it's significantly going up. And we can teach you the perfect storm of factors that are triggering this sensory overwhelm and this hypersensitivity in your kiddo early on in life. But let's first go in to the different kinds. Now I'm going to reference my laptop here because I want to go through the list of the top 10, top 12 different signs of sensory processing disorder so that you can recognize these in your kiddo and find out, hey, is this something going on with their neurosensory system that I need to get checked out and do something about? So let's go through the signs one by one real quick, then we'll get into the science, and then the final thing we'll leave you with in this video is, how do you find it? How do you know? Not just through symptoms, which is the traditional medical approach to take in symptoms, label it as this and say, do this. There is no medication, awesomely, for sensory challenges, but there is an incredible drug-free care option that has helped so many kiddos get through this overwhelm, these tantrums, these meltdowns that their overwhelmed sensory system often triggers. So number one is oversensitivity to touch, to clothing, to sounds, to smells, to lights, to you name it. Kiddos who are overwhelmed easily and end up with this oversensitivity are the ones that have a lot of tantrums and a lot of meltdowns and a lot of crying and a lot of withdrawing. And it can look like, oh man, they're just tired, or maybe it was too much sugar. But what if it's too much stress on their nervous system? So oversensitivity to clothes, to smells, to taste, to lights, to loud noises. That's probably the most common one. Number two, they have to seek sensory input. These are what we call our little raging bull kiddos. These sensory seeking kiddos, they got to touch everything, they got to climb everything, they got to chew on everything. And so they're sensory seeking. Number three is actually the opposite of that. They avoid sensory input. See, what happens with this neurosensory dysfunction within the brain and the body is for some kiddos, it's too much and they have to go sensory seeking and have the hypersensitivities. And others, it has become too much and it actually retrains their nervous system to withdraw and stay away. So avoiding sensory input. Now the next two, I'm going to put them together. Difficulty with fine motor skills, handwriting, climbing, playing catch, those sort of things, or gross motor skills. So kiddos who missed motor milestones, gross motor milestones like crawling or had difficulty walking are at a much higher propensity for sensory issues. Number 5 and number 7, I'm kind of losing number here, 6 and 7, I think. Balance and coordination issues, and really just poor body or spatial awareness. Now, we talked about the raging bull before, which is our fun little nickname to actually explain the neurology behind hypersensitive kiddos. But drunken bull kiddos is what we kind of say, man, they just can't keep it together. They struggle with where they are in space. And then as we go on, a lot of these kind of come from the hypersensitivity, but they get overwhelmed in crowded places. They have difficulty transitioning between activities. That's when the tantrums and the emotional outbursts, and they just have a hard time with self-calming, falling asleep, paying attention, and maybe these behaviors have become repetitive. If anything on that list of 10, 12, 14 different things sounds like your kiddo, and your mom and dad gut says, okay, this isn't just sometimes, this isn't just a normal toddler thing, they're tired or had too much sugar, but if this is affecting your quality of life all the time, pretty much every day or multiple times per week, that's the next thing you need to know in recognizing the signs of sensory processing disorder, because when it's that often, then it's a sign that something's going on with their nervous system. So getting into the science of sensory processing disorder, keeping it super simple. The neurology behind this can be quite advanced, but it's my job to teach you the nerdy stuff and keep it really simple. The sensory processing system is a 3-step system. Number 1, our nervous system, our brain, is reading 300 trillion bits of information, they say, per minute, okay? Some even say per second, with all the things that are happening inside our body and outside in the environment. And a child, especially first 1, 3, 5, 7 years of life, their nervous system is still growing and developing so quickly that it has 2 huge jobs to do. It's got to keep growing, keep developing, getting on track developmentally, and then it's got to deal with everything that's happening in life. And as they get older and they're toddlers and they're more seeking and they're going out of their preschool and grade school, there's more in life to process. So that's when these sensory issues will really kind of show up and be more noticeable or recognizable. So the first thing the sensory system does is it receives or perceives input. So the input comes from the 7 senses of the body, not just the 5 you learned in high school biology class, but the 6th and the 7th sense are most important. It's called proprioception, or body muscle awareness, where we are in space and where we're moving. So balance and movement input are most important to the brain by far. These are the ones, this movement-based proprioceptive or mechanoreceptive are the nerd terms, which is the perception of movement. When that gets altered from things like birth trauma, forceps, vacuum, C-section, induction, or childhood falls, that is when this gross motor and fine motor proprioceptive input or perception into the brain gets altered. And so if step 1, perception, is altered, step 2 is automatically going to be a mess, and so is step 3. Step 2 is the processing. Step 2 is the integrating and organizing of that information. Step 2 is decision making, because processing leads to decision making within the brain, which leads to step 3, which is expression. And so when your child is having these expressions, these outputs of tantrums and meltdowns and hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity to clothes, to noise, the list goes on, and you can see, oh my goodness, this symptom, this expression coming out is not the one we want. It's off track. Well, what we actually have to do is look inside the neurosensory system to the input and the coordination and the processing. And what we want to teach you here before we're all done is about something called subluxation. Now, subluxation is a neurologically focused chiropractic word that means the nervous system, specifically its ability to perceive movement from the muscles of the brainstem, what's called the suboccipital, the neck, the neurospinal system, our core, our big muscles, and our little muscles. I wanted to separate them for a second because that's actually the ranking. Where our head and brain is in space is most important to our brain from a perception, because perception creates protection and then creates expression. And most sensory kiddos are stuck in fight or flight, sympathetic protective mode, because birth trauma, physical injuries to their neck during birth is the #1 most overlooked trigger of sensory issues in kids later on in life. But birth, for many kiddos, was a long time ago. And we've normalized C-sections, vacuum, forceps, and said, don't worry, they'll grow out of it. It's no big deal. They don't. They go from that birth to colic, to constipation, to reflux, to chronic ear infections, to gross motor, fine motor, sensory developmental issues, and then sensory processing challenges later on. That subluxation, that tension, that misalignment, which alters proprioception and mechanoreception. And I'm going to put a link to this, to a full article about this, including some visuals that will map this out for you, along with this video, that alters input, and it affects the brain and nervous system's ability to properly perceive and coordinate or process this sensory, especially the movement-based information, which is the most potent or important information to the brain. And that's why the reactions, the expressions, the outputs coming out are altered. Now, why did no one tell you this before? Because pediatricians, conventional pediatricians, are very undereducated and outdated in their understanding of neurology, subluxation, and sensory issues. They miss kind of the forest through the trees, or what's right in front of them, and they just dismiss this for your child. And they say, they're just a toddler, they're just a preschooler, they're just a kindergartner, they're just young. Well, what happens later on when these sensory issues grow into ADHD and anxiety? They don't grow out of this neurosensory dysfunction, subluxation, and sympathetic dominance. They grow into what we call the perfect storm and more challenges later on. So while the conventional pediatrician misses it, and awesomely speech therapists, pediatric OTs, and PTs, which may already be on your team, along with teachers who are now more educated about sensory issues, maybe you're doing some therapies and creating and have some awesome workarounds. Maybe your child is allowed to sit on a little bit of a wobble disc. Maybe they're allowed to take little sensory breaks. Maybe there's already workarounds and adaptations in your child's life to help deal with sensory issues. But what about getting to their root cause? Wouldn't you like to do that? Wouldn't you like to find out if your child's internal processing, perception, and coordination system is actually off track or subluxated, as we call it? And you can. There is a set of sensory processing, neurological stress scans, if you will. They go by a bunch of different names, but simply put, they can find this overwhelmed, imbalanced, and off-track neurosensory stress on your child's nervous system. They're called the neurological insight scans, and I'll link in this video all the copy that goes with it, or if you're watching on Instagram, you can go up to our link in bio and find it, and you can read about neurological stress, subluxation, and birth trauma. You can read about this sensory processing disorder and learn more about it. We have dozens of articles on our pxdocs website about sensory issues in kids, including an article about how to recognize the signs, like we're talking about in this one. And then we have articles on subluxation and the insight scans. And I know I'm adding a lot more learning in here, but I want you to take that route. I want you to click on those links and go check out those articles and other videos, because you're not going to find this information about the real root cause and drug-free solutions that can calm, organize, and integrate the nervous system so that there's less of the challenges coming out of it. Neurologically focused chiropractic care is not a treatment. It's not a cure for sensory processing disorder in kids. It actually gets to the root cause so that the nervous system gets back on track, organized, integrated, and functions better on its own. And when families do that, when they get this kind of care for their kiddos, often all the different workarounds and the different sensitivities, they may still be there some, but the quality of life is so much improved that they don't have to do these workarounds or cheat codes anymore, because the kiddo can handle these transitions. They can pay attention, regulate their emotions, and so forth, once these neurologically focused chiropractic adjustments starts to restore the perception, the integration and organization of the nervous system. And if you help improve what's going into the nervous system, you clean up its pathways and you calm the noise going into the brain of these sensory kiddos, you then get to calm the noise, calm the stress, calm the sensory issues that are coming out. It's a root cause approach that I know so many of you have been looking for, and I'm glad you found this video. Click those links, Learn more if you're ready to get your child a consultation and a neurological insight examination and see those scans and see if your child is struggling with this sympathetic dominance, this subluxation, and this neurological sensory storm, and that may be causing the tantrums, the meltdowns, and so forth. Well, on our website is where you can click to set an appointment. On the pxdocs website, you can find all the directory of other nervous system focused chiropractors all over the world, so you can do that there too. But I ask you this at the end of this video: will you please share this with at least one more parent or a group of parents? Maybe if you're in a Facebook group full of sensory parents, share this information because it's awesome. I'll say it one more time to close this out. It's so good to give our kiddos these sensory workarounds, but it's not so easy to have the perfect diet, the perfect schedule, the perfect transitions, the perfect sleep schedule all the time, especially if they struggle to sleep. So getting to the root cause of this stress on their nervous system and calming it, clearing it, integrating it is such a massive improvement in their quality of life. I strongly encourage you and your family to take that direction, and please share this opportunity to find that information and find this kind of care with another family or more families struggling with sensory storm issues as well. God bless, be well. We'll see you on the next one.